The great hall of Nexus Prime sparkled with light from 1,000 different stars. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their assigned seats, each group looking very different from the others. Some had scales that changed color with their moods. Others floated in glass tanks filled with glowing liquid. A few looked like walking trees, with eyes that blinked slowly. At the center of the hall stood Ambassador HFY. He was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shine in the light. His people, the hegemony, had ruled parts of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Today, he would speak about the newest species to join their cosmic community. Honored members of the Galactic Council, HFY began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. We gather today to discuss the humans of Earth. A holographic display appeared above his head. It showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked ordinary compared to the crystal worlds and gas giants that many council members called home. The humans achieved faster than light travel just 5 years ago, HFY continued. They made first contact with our Zalari trading friends in the Outer Rim. Since then, we have studied them carefully. The display changed to show images of humans. They looked small and weak compared to most species in the hall. They had no natural armor, no claws, no special abilities that made them stand out. They lived for less than 100 years, which seemed like a blink of an eye to species that lived for thousands. Let me share what we have learned, HFY said. Humans are only 200,000 years old as a species. This makes them babies compared to us. Their technology is basic. They still use metal ships and chemical rockets for most of their space travel. Several council members made sounds of amusement. The ethereal collective, ancient beings of pure energy, whispered among themselves about how primitive it all seemed. But most concerning, HFY went on, is their history. Humans have been at war with each other for their entire existence. They fight over land, resources, ideas, and sometimes, for no clear reason at all. In just the last century, they had 2 global wars that killed millions of their own kind. The display now showed images of human battlefields, explosions, destroyed cities, and soldiers fighting in terrible conditions. Many council members shook their heads or made disgusted sounds. Their planet offers nothing special, HFY explained. Earth has no rare minerals that we need. It sits in an empty part of space with no strategic value. The humans produce nothing that we cannot make better ourselves. A voice spoke up from the Zalari section. Trader Vixlen, a short being covered in colorful feathers, stood up. Honored Ambassador, if I may interrupt. HFY nodded, though he looked annoyed. During my time trading with humans, I noticed something unusual, Vixlen said. They ask many questions. More questions than most species. They want to understand everything about how our ships work, how our societies function, how we solve problems. They learn very quickly. Curiosity is common among young species, HFY replied dismissively. They will lose this as they mature and accept their place in the galaxy. But Ambassador, Vixlen continued, they also show remarkable adaptability. I have seen humans working in environments that would kill most species. They seem to thrive in harsh conditions, and their problem-solving methods are different. Sometimes, they find solutions that surprise even experienced traders. HFY waved his hand. These are minor traits that many species possess. The facts remain clear. Humans are a young, primitive, warlike species with nothing to offer our advanced civilization. The hall grew quiet as HFY prepared for the final part of his presentation. Based on all evidence, I recommend that humans be classified as Category 7, Insignificant Species. They should be granted basic trade rights but nothing more. No access to advanced technology. No military alliances. No voice in council decisions. The vote was quick and unanimous. 847 species agreed that humans were not worth their attention. Only Vixlen abstained, still thinking about the strange intensity in human eyes when they asked their endless questions. Within days, the decision reached Earth. Human leaders gathered in their primitive council chambers to hear the news. They were told they could trade basic goods like art, entertainment, and simple manufactured items. In return, they could buy basic alien technology and materials, but they were forbidden from accessing advanced weapons, shield technology, or faster ship designs. They could not join any military alliance or defensive pact. They could not vote on galactic policies or laws. They were essentially cosmic peasants, allowed to exist at the edges of a vast civilization they could never truly join. The human representatives listened to these terms without complaint. They asked a few questions about trade routes and communication protocols, then accepted the conditions with what seemed like resignation. Ambassador Sarah Chen, Earth's lead diplomat, signed the agreement with steady hands. She thanked the Galactic Council for their generosity and promised that humanity would respect the boundaries set for them. As news of the decision spread through human space, most people felt a mixture of disappointment and acceptance. They were part of a galactic community now, even if only as junior members. It was better than being alone in the universe. But in quiet government meetings and private research facilities, a different conversation was taking place. Human leaders looked at the restrictions not as limitations, but as a challenge. They had been underestimated before by those who thought they understood human nature. The galaxy had made a decision about humanity based on incomplete information. They saw a young, chaotic species and assumed weakness. They looked at human history and saw only violence and division. What they missed was humanity's greatest strength: the ability to adapt, learn, and overcome any obstacle placed in their path. The Council had just given humanity the greatest motivation possible. They had been told they were insignificant. Now they would have to prove that assessment very, very wrong. 30 years passed since the Galactic Council's decision. During this time, humanity seemed to accept their place as the galaxy's least important species. Human traders could be found throughout known space, selling simple goods and buying basic alien technology. They were polite, hardworking, and never caused trouble. Human colonies spread to worlds that other species considered worthless. They settled on planets with harsh weather, thin air, and dangerous wildlife. Places where the gravity was too strong or too weak for most aliens to live comfortably. The Council watched these settlements grow and smiled at human stubbornness. "Look how they struggle on those terrible worlds," Ambassador Kethvar often said to his colleagues. "They take the scraps we leave behind and act grateful for them." But across the galaxy, bigger problems were growing. The Vexhai Empire had been expanding their territory for decades. At first, they only took empty star systems and uninhabited planets. The Council allowed this because the Vexhai were a powerful military species, and their expansion seemed peaceful. Then, the Vexhai began demanding tribute from smaller species. They would arrive at a planet with their large warships and ask for food, minerals, or manufactured goods. Most species paid rather than fight. The Council called these trade agreements and did nothing to stop them. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the ancient sectors of the galaxy. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had ruled vast territories millions of years ago, began to wake up from their long sleep. They started reclaiming worlds they considered theirs by ancient right. Entire colonies of younger species suddenly found themselves evicted from planets their families had lived on for generations. Trade routes that had been safe for centuries became dangerous. Pirates and raiders grew bold, attacking merchant ships and stealing cargo. The galaxy's carefully maintained peace was cracking. Through all of this chaos, human ships continued to appear everywhere. When the Vexhai attacked a Zilari trading post, humans arrived first with medical supplies and rescue ships. When the Ethereals forced colonists off a mining world, human vessels showed up to evacuate families and transport them to safety. "Where do they keep coming from?" wondered Captain Zorthak of the Hegemony Defense Force. His sensors had detected human ships in 7 different sectors just this week. How do they move so quickly? The Council received reports of human activity from across the galaxy. Human doctors treating wounded civilians. Human engineers helping repair damaged space stations. Human diplomats negotiating peaceful solutions between feuding species. It seemed like humans were involved in every crisis, large or small. When council members asked human representatives about this, they received simple answers. "We go where we can help," said Ambassador Chen during one meeting. "There is always profit in being useful to others. But how can you afford to send ships to so many places?" asked a hegemony official. "Your economy is too small to support such widespread operations." Chen smiled. "Humans are good at finding efficient ways to do things. We share resources and coordinate our efforts. It costs less than you might think." The council found these explanations reasonable. Humans were known for their efficiency and their strange habit of working together even when it was not profitable. Many species considered this a weakness, but it allowed humans to do more with less. What the council did not know was that each human rescue mission served multiple purposes. While human doctors treated wounded aliens, human linguists recorded new languages and dialects. While human engineers repaired damaged equipment, they studied advanced technology and learned how it worked. While human diplomats negotiated peace agreements, they mapped the complex relationships between different species and governments. Every human ship carried hidden sensors that recorded detailed information about the planets they visited. They measured gravity, atmosphere, magnetic fields, and resource deposits. They noted defensive positions, communication arrays, and shipping routes. All of this data was quietly transmitted back to Earth through seemingly innocent trade communications. Human colonies on worthless worlds were not struggling as the Council believed. They were thriving in ways that would have shocked alien observers. Underground facilities stretched for miles beneath the surface of barren planets. Orbital shipyards orbited gas giants, hidden behind their moons. Asteroid mining operations extracted resources at rates that would have rivaled major alien industrial centers. But perhaps most importantly, humans were building relationships. Species that the Council ignored because they were too small or too primitive found themselves welcomed as equals by human traders and diplomats. Refugee populations displaced by Vex-high expansion or ethereal reclamation were offered new homes in human space. These species brought with them knowledge, skills, and technologies that the Council had never bothered to catalog. A race of insect-like beings had developed quantum computing techniques that surpassed anything the major powers possessed. Aquatic species from high-gravity worlds had created materials that were stronger and lighter than anything in Council databases. Slowly, quietly, humanity was building something new. Not just an economic network or a political alliance, but a community of species that shared knowledge freely and supported each other's growth. The Council remained unaware of these developments. They were focused on managing the growing tensions between the major powers and maintaining their own positions of authority. The idea that insignificant humanity might be creating an alternative to their system never occurred to them. When Trader Vixlin tried to warn them about unusual patterns in human activity, his concerns were dismissed. "You worry too much about these humans," Kethvar told him. "They are helpful in small ways, but they remain what they have always been, a minor species, playing at the edges of real civilization." As the 30th anniversary of humanity's classification approached, the galaxy seemed to be holding its breath. The Vexi's High Empire was massing fleets near Council borders. The Ethereal Collective was expanding their territory more aggressively. Smaller conflicts erupted daily between species competing for resources or territory. In human space, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of a facility that the Council did not know existed. Around her, representatives from hundreds of species worked together to coordinate responses to crises across the galaxy. Displays showed real-time information from every major star system, gathered by the vast network of human ships and installations. "Ma'am," reported Captain Martinez, "we're receiving distress signals from 3 more Council worlds. The situation is escalating faster than our projections indicated." Chen nodded grimly. How much longer before the Council realizes they can't handle this alone? Intelligence estimates 2 months, maybe 3 if they're too proud to admit they need help. Then we continue as planned, Chen said. Keep our people ready. When the Council finally calls for assistance, we need to be prepared to act immediately. She looked at the displays, showing the chaos spreading across the galaxy. For 30 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had been underestimated, ignored, and dismissed as insignificant. Soon, the galaxy would learn just how wrong that assessment had been. The attack came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. 3 of the Galactic Council's most important worlds suddenly went silent within minutes of each other. Nexus Prime, the capital world where the Council met, found its planetary shields failing as Vex-High warships appeared in orbit. Hegemony Central, the military headquarters of the galaxy's strongest species, lost all communication with its outer defense stations. Zilari Prime, the trading hub that connected dozens of economic systems, watched its spaceports explode in brilliant flashes of light. Ambassador Kethvar was in his office when the first reports arrived. His aide, a young hegemony officer named Veltar, burst through the door without knocking. "Sir, we're under attack." Veltar's blue skin had turned pale with fear. "The Vex-High Empire is hitting us simultaneously across 3 systems." Kethvar activated his communication screen, trying to contact the military command center. Static filled the display. He tried the Council emergency network. More static. Even his personal connection to other ambassadors produced nothing but electronic noise. "How is this possible?" Kethvar demanded. "Our communication systems are protected by the most advanced encryption in the galaxy." Through his office window, he could see Vex-High fighters streaking across the sky above Nexus Prime's crystal towers. Explosions bloomed in the distance as the planet's defense installations were systematically destroyed. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on Hegemony Central and Zilari Prime. The attacks were perfectly coordinated, striking at the exact moment when each world's defenses were at their weakest. The Vex-High seemed to know exactly where every shield generator, communication array, and weapon platform was located. General Hawksmoor of the Hegemony Defense Force managed to reach his command bunker as enemy forces landed on his world's surface. His staff worked frantically to establish contact with other military installations. But their efforts were useless. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "it's not just jamming. They're using our own security codes against us. Every message we send is being intercepted and redirected." "That's impossible," Hawksmoor growled. "Only Council members have access to those codes." But the evidence was undeniable. The Vex-High Empire knew too much. They knew which supply routes to cut first. They knew which government officials to target. They knew exactly how to cripple the Council's ability to coordinate a response. As the first day of the crisis ended, the scope of the disaster became clear. The 3 main Council worlds were under occupation. Communication networks throughout Council space were compromised. Military forces were scattered and unable to work together effectively. In desperation, the remaining Council members tried to contact their allies. The ethereal collective responded with a message that chilled every representative who read it. "This conflict does not concern us. We have withdrawn our forces to protect our own territory." Other powerful species gave similar responses. Some claimed they were dealing with their own emergencies. Others simply stated they would not risk their people in a losing battle. Ambassador Kethvar found himself in an emergency bunker deep beneath Nexus Prime's surface, surrounded by the few Council members who had managed to reach safety. The proud leaders of galactic civilization huddled around a single communication terminal, trying to figure out how their mighty empire had collapsed so quickly. "We need to face reality," said Councillor Thrensa of the Maritime Alliance. "The Vex-High have outmaneuvered us completely. They must have been planning this for years." And down. "We have they why, and be stay." "Decades," corrected Intelligence Director Morven. "The patterns we're seeing suggest infiltration going back at least 30 years. They've had agents throughout our government structure." Kethvar felt a cold understanding creep over him. 30 years, he repeated slowly. That's when the humans first made contact with us. Several council members looked at him with confusion. You're not suggesting the humans are involved in this, said Thrensa. They're insignificant. They have no military capability worthy of concern. No, Kethvar said, his mind racing. But think about it. For 30 years, they've been everywhere. Every crisis, every disaster, every conflict, human ships always arrive first. They ask questions about everything. They want to understand how our systems work. Ambassador, interrupted Veltar, who had been monitoring the few communication channels that still functioned. We're receiving a transmission from human space. Multiple human ships are requesting permission to enter Council territory. They claim they're responding to distress signals. S. Kethvar stared at his aide. How did they get through the Vex High blockade? Unknown, sir, but they're asking to speak with Council leadership. They say they have information that might be useful. The Council members looked at each other uncertainly. They were desperate, but the idea of asking for help from humanity, the species they had classified as insignificant, felt like admitting their own complete failure. What choice do we have? Asked Thrensa finally. Our allies have abandoned us. Our military is scattered. Our government is in ruins. If the humans can offer assistance, perhaps we should listen. Kethvar gave the order to allow human ships to approach. Within hours, a human fleet arrived at the edge of Council space. The ships were larger than anyone expected, and clearly incorporated technology that should have been beyond human capabilities. But the real shock came when the lead human vessel transmitted a message to the Council bunker. The face that appeared on their screen was familiar. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now wearing a military uniform with the rank of Admiral. Honored Council members, Chen said, her voice calm and professional. I am Admiral Chen of the Confederation of Free Worlds. We have been monitoring the situation and are prepared to offer assistance. Confederation of Free Worlds? Kethvar repeated. We've never heard of this organization. Chen smiled slightly. That's because you never asked. For 30 years, you've assumed that humanity was alone and unimportant. You never bothered to learn about the relationships we've been building with other species. The display behind Chen showed a star map that made the Council members gasp. Hundreds of star systems were marked as part of this confederation, systems the Council had ignored because they contained species considered too primitive or too weak to matter. We are prepared to intervene in this conflict, Chen continued. But we will only do so under specific conditions. The current Council system has proven itself incapable of maintaining galactic peace. If we save your civilization, it will be to replace it with something better. Kethvar felt his world tilting. The humans, the insignificant species his people had dismissed, were dictating terms to the Galactic Council. What are you proposing? He asked weakly. A new system of government based on equality and mutual cooperation, rather than dominance and hierarchy, Chen replied. A system where species are valued for their contributions, rather than their age or military power. And if we refuse? Chen's expression remained neutral. Then the Vex High Empire will complete their conquest, and you will have to live with the consequences of your choices, both past and present. The Council members looked at each other in stunned silence. They had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Now, they were being offered survival, in exchange for giving up everything they had built. But as explosions echoed through the bunker above them, the choice became clear. They could maintain their pride and die as rulers of nothing, or they could accept help and live as equals in a new galactic order. Kethvar took a deep breath and looked directly at the human admiral. What do you need from us? Admiral Sarah Chen's ship arrived at the Emergency Council bunker 3 days later. When the airlock opened, the Council members expected to see a small delegation of humans, with perhaps a few alien advisors. Instead, they watched in amazement as representatives from dozens of species filed into their meeting chamber. There were the Kreshta, insect-like beings the Council had dismissed as primitive hive minds. Walking beside them came the Miran Collective, aquatic creatures from high-gravity worlds that Council surveys had marked as unsuitable for civilization. Behind them were the Void Walkers, energy beings that most species thought were just myths. But the biggest shock was seeing species the Council knew well. Several Zilari traders stood with the human delegation, including Vixlen, who had tried to warn the Council about human capabilities 30 years earlier. Representatives from 3 different hegemony colony worlds were present, along with officials from mining guild installations and free merchant confederations. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Kethvar. "How did you recruit our own people?" Admiral Chen took her seat at the head of the table. "We didn't recruit them. We listened to them. For 30 years, your government has ignored the needs of smaller colonies and independent settlements. These people joined us because we offered them something you never did: respect and equal representation." She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. But this map looked nothing like the ones in Council databases. Where the Council saw empty space, the display showed hundreds of inhabited systems. Where Council charts marked primitive species, the human map indicated advanced civilizations with their own technologies and cultures. "This is the real galaxy," Chen explained. "Not the limited view from Nexus Prime, but the complete picture that includes everyone who calls space their home." Councillor Threnja stared at the display. "We had no idea so many species had achieved space travel." "Because you never looked," replied Commander Zixara, a Kreshta officer whose voice buzzed through a translation device. "Your surveys visited our systems once, decided we were uninteresting, and never returned. You missed our cities, our technologies, our contributions to galactic knowledge." "But how did you coordinate with all these species?" asked General Haxmore. "Our intelligence networks show no record of large-scale communications between these systems." Chen smiled. "Human ships have been establishing communication networks for 3 decades. But we didn't use your protocols or frequencies. We developed our own systems based on technologies shared by our partners." The display changed to show the technical specifications of the communication network. It used quantum entanglement principles that the Council had never fully understood, combined with biological computing methods learned from hive mind species like the Kreshta. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Felnara, the Council's chief scientist. "Those technologies require computational power beyond anything we've achieved." "Beyond anything you've achieved alone," corrected Vixlen. "But when dozens of species share their knowledge freely, you can accomplish things that seemed impossible before." Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the display controls. "Let me show you what we've built while you weren't paying attention." The map zoomed in on a system that Council records listed as uninhabited asteroid field. The display revealed a massive industrial complex, built inside hollowed-out asteroids. Shipyards larger than anything in Council space were producing vessels that incorporated technologies from multiple species. "This is just one of 47 major construction facilities in Confederation space," Chen explained. "We've been preparing for this conflict for 15 years. Ever since our intelligence networks detected Vex-high infiltration of your government." Kethvar felt his legs go weak. "You knew about the spies? Why didn't you warn us?" "We tried," said Vixlen quietly. "I submitted reports about suspicious activities and unusual information requests. Your intelligence service filed them away without investigation. You also ignored our diplomatic messages," added Chen. "Over the past 5 years, we sent 17 formal communications offering to share intelligence about potential threats. Your staff marked them as low-priority correspondence from insignificant species." The Council members sat in stunned silence as the full scope of their failure became clear. While they had focused on maintaining their traditional power structures, an entirely new civilization had grown up around them. "Show us your military capabilities," demanded General Haxmore. "If you're going to fight the Vex-high Empire, we need to know what you're planning." Chen nodded to one of her officers. a tall human woman with cybernetic implants that interface directly with the holographic system. The display shifted to show fleet positions throughout the galaxy. We currently have 634 ships positioned in strategic locations, the officer reported. Each vessel incorporates technologies from multiple Confederation species. Our weapon systems use Voidwalker energy projection techniques combined with Kreshta targeting algorithms and Mirror shield harmonics. 600 ships against the Vex-High fleet of over 2,000, calculated Haxmore. Those are not favorable odds. You're thinking like a Council military commander, said Commander Zix, Era. Large fleets fighting traditional battles. Human strategy is different. They taught us to be unpredictable. Chen reactivated the display to show the current positions of Vex-High forces. The Empire expects us to attack their fleets directly or attempt to retake the captured worlds. Instead, we're going to strike at their supply lines, communication networks, and command structures simultaneously. The plan that unfolded on the display was unlike anything in Council military doctrine. Instead of massing forces for large battles, human strategy called for hundreds of small, coordinated strikes across dozens of systems. Each attack would target a specific weakness in Vex-High operations. This is chaos, protested General Haxmore. How can you coordinate so many simultaneous operations? Because we learned from species you ignored, replied Chen. Kreshta hive minds can process thousands of data streams simultaneously. Miron collective organisms think in parallel processing patterns. Voidwalkers exist in multiple dimensions and can observe events from perspectives we can't imagine. She gestured to the mixed group of species around the table. This isn't human strategy. This is Confederation strategy, developed by combining the best thinking from dozens of different civilizations. Kethvar finally found his voice. What happens to the Council if you succeed? The Council, as it exists, will be dissolved, Chen said matter-of-factly. It will be replaced by the Democratic Federation of Worlds, where every species has an equal vote, regardless of their age, size, or military power. And what if we refuse to accept these changes? Chen's expression became serious. Then you'll face the Vex-High Empire alone. But I should mention that many of your own colony worlds have already voted to join the Confederation. If your central government falls, they'll continue as Federation members with or without your approval. The weight of this revelation settled over the Council representatives. Their empire was already crumbling. Not from external conquest, but from internal choice. Their own people were choosing a different path. We need time to consider this, said Thringza. You have 6 hours, Chen replied. That's when we launch our counterattack against the Vex-High Empire, with or without Council cooperation. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Kethvar sat in his chair, staring at the tactical display. 30 years ago, he had classified humanity as insignificant. Now they were offering to save galactic civilization, but only on their own terms. The age of Council dominance was ending. The question now was whether they would adapt to the new reality or be left behind by the changing galaxy. Outside the bunker, Admiral Chen looked up at the smoke-filled sky above Nexus Prime. In a few hours, the real war would begin, but she already knew who would win. The Vex-High Empire had planned for victory over the old galaxy. They had no idea what the new galaxy was capable of. The war began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time across 47 different star systems simultaneously. The Vex-High Empire, confident in their strategic advantage, suddenly found themselves under attack from directions they had never expected. On Vex-High military installations throughout the galaxy, alarms began sounding as small. Confederation fleets appeared without warning. These weren't the massive battle groups that Empire commanders had prepared to fight. Instead, they faced quick, precise strikes that targeted specific vulnerabilities before disappearing back into space. Admiral Chen watched the battle reports flow in from the command center of her flagship, the Determination. Around her, officers from dozens of different species worked together with an efficiency that would have amazed the old council. Kreshta, tactical officers, processed hundreds of data streams simultaneously, while Miron communications specialists maintained contact with fleets spread across the galaxy. "Report from Sector 7, announced Lieutenant Commander Yash Uri, a void walker whose energy form flickered between dimensions. "Target neutralized. Enemy communication array is offline. Sector 12 successful," added Commander Zix Ara through her translation device. "Vex High Supply Depot destroyed. No casualties on our side." Chen nodded as she watched the tactical display update. The Confederation strategy was working exactly as planned. Instead of fighting the Empire's strengths, they were eliminating the infrastructure that made Vex High expansion possible. Emperor Vex then himself received the first reports of the attacks, while reviewing his conquest plans on board his flagship, the Dominator. The massive vessel, larger than most space stations, sat at the center of a fleet that had never known defeat. "How many ships are attacking us?" the Emperor demanded from his aide, General Mortak. "Unknown. Your Supremacy," Mortak replied nervously. "The attacks are happening too quickly to count. Our forces report engaging small fleets, but by the time reinforcements arrive, the attackers have vanished. Small fleets cannot threaten our empire." Vex then growled. "Order all forces to ignore these minor raids and continue the assault on Council worlds." But as the hours passed, the minor raids began to have serious effects. Vex High forces found themselves cut off from supplies and reinforcements. Communication networks that had coordinated their lightning conquest suddenly went silent. Fuel depots, weapons factories, and repair stations exploded in carefully timed strikes. The turning point came when a Confederation fleet appeared directly above the planet where the Empire held their main prisoner processing facility. Thousands of captured Council civilians and military personnel were being held there, waiting to be transported to labor camps throughout Vex High space. The rescue operation lasted exactly 43 minutes. Confederation ships landed troops who moved through the facility with precision that stunned the Vex High guards. Human soldiers worked alongside Kreshta warriors and Voidwalker infiltrators to free every prisoner without a single casualty among the captives. As the rescued prisoners were evacuated, many Council military officers got their first look at Confederation forces in action. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Their coordination is impossible," General Haxmore observed as he watched human and alien troops working together. "No species can integrate so completely with others. Long day. With pleat hid. Long day. With others. Humans adapt," explained Captain Martinez, the human officer coordinating his evacuation. "It's what we do. When we meet a new species, we don't try to make them more like us. We learn from them and become more like them when it makes us stronger." The Emperor's confidence finally began to crack when reports arrived that 3 of his most important military installations had fallen to Confederation forces within the same hour. The attacks had been coordinated across vast distances with split-second timing. "This is impossible," Vex then roared at his advisors. "How can they be everywhere at once? How do they move so quickly between systems?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Trader Vixlen, monitoring communications from his position with the Confederation fleet, detected an interesting pattern in Vex High military transmissions. "Admiral," he reported to Chen. "They're trying to recall their scattered forces to defend core systems. But they're using the same communication protocols they've had for centuries. Their encryption is sophisticated, but predictable." Chen smiled. "Time to show them what happens when you face an enemy that thinks differently." Within hours, every major Vex High military communication was being intercepted, decoded, and redirected by Confederation intelligence teams. The Empire's own orders were turned against them, sending fleets to empty systems while leaving important installations undefended. The final phase of the war began when Admiral Chen sent a message directly to Emperor Vexus then aboard his flagship. "Your Supremacy," she said, her image appearing on his command screen. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Confederation of Free Worlds. Your empire is defeated. I am offering you the opportunity to surrender with honor. Vexthan's rage was magnificent to behold. You dare speak to me of surrender? I command the largest fleet in the galaxy. My armies have never known defeat. Your armies were designed to fight the old galaxy, Chen replied calmly. Large fleets against large fleets. Traditional strategies against traditional defenses. But we're not the old galaxy. We're something new. The display behind Chen showed the current tactical situation. Vex High forces were scattered across hundreds of systems, their supply lines severed, their communications compromised. Meanwhile, Confederation fleets continued to appear exactly where they were needed, when they were needed. How are you doing this? Vex then demanded. We learned from everyone you ignored, Chen explained. Voidwalkers taught us to think in multiple dimensions. Kreshta hive minds showed us how to process vast amounts of information simultaneously. Miran collectives demonstrated parallel thinking. And humans contributed our greatest strength: adaptability. She leaned forward in her chair. You spent decades infiltrating the Council because you understood their rigid thinking. You knew how they would respond to each situation. But you never studied us. And, minus Scream, you never learned how we think, how we fight, how we solve problems. What do you want? Vex then asked, his voice heavy with defeat. Join the Federation, Chen said simply. Give up your empire, but keep your people. Contribute your knowledge and abilities to building something better than what came before. And if I refuse? Then your empire ends anyway, but your people suffer unnecessarily. The choice is yours. Emperor Vexes then looked around his command center at the faces of officers who had followed him into disaster. The greatest military conquest in galactic history had been undone in less than 6 months by an enemy he had never bothered to understand. I accept your terms, he said finally. The formal surrender took place on Nexus Prime, which had been liberated by Confederation forces 3 weeks earlier. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Hall, where the Council had once declared humanity insignificant. Ambassador Kethvar, now elderly and humbled, stood before the assembled delegates as they prepared to sign the Charter for the Democratic Federation of Worlds. The document would officially end the age of Council dominance and begin an era where every species had an equal voice in galactic affairs. Admiral Chen, he said, as she prepared to sign the treaty, I must ask you something that has troubled me for months. How did humanity plan so far ahead? How did you see what we missed? Chen smiled as she picked up the signing stylus. You classified us as insignificant because we were young and chaotic. You looked at our history of conflict and saw primitiveness. But you failed to understand what that history taught us. She gestured to the mixed crowd of species around them. Every war, every struggle, every challenge in human history forced us to adapt or die. We learned to find strength in diversity, to solve problems by combining different approaches, to survive by working together, even with former enemies. Kethvar nodded slowly. You saw opportunity where we saw chaos. We saw potential where you saw problems, Chen corrected gently. The galaxy is vast and full of different forms of intelligence. When you approach that diversity with curiosity instead of judgment, you discover that everyone has something valuable to contribute. As she signed her name to the treaty, Chen looked up at the assembled representatives. The Council ruled for 1,000 years by maintaining divisions between species. The Federation will endure by celebrating the connections between us. The ceremony concluded with representatives from over 800 species, formally establishing the new galactic government. As they filed out of the hall, many stopped to speak with human delegates, eager to learn about the thinking that had transformed their universe. Ambassador Kethvar was among the last to leave. As he walked past Admiral Chen, he paused and spoke quietly. We were wrong about humanity, he said. I spent 30 years believing you were insignificant. I failed to see that significance isn't measured by age or military power, but by the ability to bring out the best in others. Chen nodded respectfully. The Council achieved great things in its time. The Federation will build on that foundation while adding what was missing: the recognition that every voice in the galaxy has value. As the old ambassador walked away, Chen looked around the empty hall, where humanity's journey to significance had begun. Outside the crystal walls, ships from dozens of species worked together to rebuild the damage caused by the war. The galaxy had learned that calling someone insignificant often says more about the observer than the observed. In underestimating humanity, the Council had revealed their own limitations. In proving them wrong, humans had shown that the greatest strength came not from standing apart, but from bringing everyone together. The age of inequality was over. The age of cooperation had begun.